All right, lesson 6. Lesson 6, we're going to make a really basic 3-panel comic. And our goal here is to learn the difference between the brush and pen tools, or pencil tool, a little bit how they work, learn a little bit more about that shape tool we used last chapter, learn some more details about the text tool, how to save custom workspaces, and then how to save character and paragraph styles for when we're doing a bunch of formatting with text. Then we'll continue to practice with the brush tool. So we'll lay out a three-panel comic and we'll get it going. Also in this chapter, we're going to have 9 Gorillion layers, so make sure that we stay nice and organized in this one, and we'll go over some of those kind of organizational tricks while we're doing it. All right, just like what we did for lesson or chapter 5, we need to start a new document from scratch. I'm going to come up and go to New File. I have the one that I made last time, and I'm going to just modify it so it says Untitled 1. I'm going to type in Chapter 6, Comics. For my sizing for comics actually can be pretty important. So like if you were making a webcomic, I would still think about like what it would look like when it was printed later. So if you are into comics, I'd spend a little bit of time researching your sizing. So like many American comics make theirs on 11 by 17 inch paper with a full bleed on that paper of 10 by 15 and 3/8 with an actual art size of 9 3/4 by 15 inches. And like that's a lot of information. There's some good stuff floating around on Reddit. If you were going to make a webcomic, I would spend a little bit of time researching what size you want to make it at so it's easier and cheaper to print. I see a lot of webcomic artists having to redo their layouts because they started a webcomic without thinking about eventual prints in mind. In our case, we're going to blow all that off though and just use a nice easy size for us to lay our stuff out in. So for width, we're going to do 9. Make sure you are in inches. And for width, height, we're going to do 3. Make sure we're at 300 because if we did want to print this, 300 would be the magic number. We want RGB, 8-bit, sRGB, white background. So make sure all of your settings look like so. Then I'll click Create. Okay, so we want to make a custom workspace. I'm going to start by coming up to the top right, and I'm going to go to Painting, and I'm going to reset Painting if Painting isn't already reset. And let's expand this out so we can start setting it up. First, we don't need clone source, so I'm going to close that. I don't need tool presets, and I don't need libraries. If you were doing a real comic, you'd probably use libraries. History, I'm going to toss over here with swatches again, and I'm going to bring brushes out pretty close to what we started with last time. Now, since we're going to be laying out comics, we need some additional stuff over here. So I'm going to come up to Window, and I'm going to go to Character, which will also open up Character and Paragraph, and I'm going to drag these out into their own spot. And I want to grab is it Paragraph Styles? There it is. Paragraph Styles or Character Styles. Again, it'll open up both. And I'm going to nestle those as their own thing over here as well. And then I'm going to click this little arrow to collapse it down because I don't need those open at the moment. Same thing with brushes and brush settings. I don't really need those open yet, so I'm going to go ahead and collapse that one down as well. Ooh, actually, I forgot something. Let's pop this one back open. We want shapes. And I'm going to throw shapes above character and paragraph styles. So I've got shapes, character, paragraph, and then I've got my styles down here. And then I'll collapse this one down. Finally, over here, I don't know why they closed both of these, but we want color. And let's go ahead and add properties as well. And for properties, I'm going to nestle it between here. You can either close info or you can nestle info over here. Info is neat. We're not going to use it this chapter, but it can be helpful when you're doing layouts for comics and stuff like that. And let's drag you all the way up so I have more room in properties, which we're going to need later. Now I want to save this, so I'm going to come up to my workspace and I'm going to click New Workspace. And I'll turn all 3 of these on, and I'll label this Comics. Now at any given point, I have access to it just like all of my other workspaces. So this can be a really handy way to, when you're doing common tasks using certain workspaces, you can save them now. Okay, let's make our first shape. So we have our shape tool over yonder, and we used it last time to add in that black background, remember? And the shape tool is neat. So like if I throw it down on here, I have controls to change the size. I also have controls over something called fill, which is what the interior color looks like. And I also have something called stroke, which is like a line that goes around the outside of it that I can make bigger or smaller using this little slider for my stroke size. What we need for this first shape, though, is a pretty simple shape. So I want where it says fill, I'm going to pick white. And if white isn't in here, just come down, pop open grayscale, and pick this first one out of grayscale, so you've got white. And then for my stroke, I want black. Again, if black isn't available, just pop open grayscale and grab black out of this bottom section. And then for our stroke, this time we actually do want a stroke. So we want it to have a certain amount of thickness. And I'm going to put in 10. Let's go ahead and throw in our first shape. So I'm just going to click and be like, yo, how big do you want it? And I want it by 2 inches. Make sure you type in inch, hit enter. Now, last time we relied on being able to drag. I'm going to switch to the move tool. Being able to drag and move our stuff around and get these pink lines, but I wanted a certain distance away from the edge. And a really easy way to do that is actually just to type it in and tell it where I want it. So over here on the right, I have my properties. Right now it's in pixels. Let's switch it to inches. So I'm going to hit Command or Control R on my keyboard to open up my ruler. See that little guy right there? It's also in View under Rulers. And if I right click on that ruler, I can very quickly switch to inches, and that will display inches now over here. I'm going to hit Command R to close that because I don't need it. And what I want is I want this top left corner to be a 1/2 inch from the top and a 1/2 inch from the left of my design. And right here where I have this X and Y, it refers to that top left corner. So I can type in 0.5, enter, and it moves it. And I can type in 0.5 and it moves it, giving me a perfect little position for my rectangle. Excuse me, square. Now my square actually is slightly closer to that because like if we zoom in and look at this vector shape, we can see that there's a line going through it. That's the actual spot of the shape, and then this black thing going around it is the stroke. So if we wanted it to be exact, we'd actually want to click over here and switch this to be on the inside, but it's not going to matter for us today. Now I need to label this because we're going to keep everything well labeled throughout this chapter because there's going to be a lot of layers, and if stuff is slightly wrong in your layer layout, it will cause massive problems. So I'm going to label this frame left because we need my drawing frame for left. Next, we want to duplicate this, and so duplicate it however you want, whatever way gives you a giggle. I don't really care. So like you can hold down Alt-Option and drag over, or you can hold down Alt-Option and drag up, and then click and drag over. You can edit, copy, paste it. It doesn't really matter that much. And for this next one, we can rely on those pink lines, and we can just drag it center. Again, if your pink lines aren't appearing, come up to Window and, View, and go to Snap. I'm going to label this one frame right, frame middle. And I'm going to duplicate it again. So I've got the Move tool active, holding down Alt-Option, drag over. And while I'm dragging over, what will be neat is it snaps to that horizontal line for me. And then what's really neat is that it knows how far away the other one is. And just like that, I have my spacing. So it automatically detected the spacing here and said, you probably want that same spacing here. Neat. I like that, Photoshop. And we'll label this one frame right. Now we need to make the layers that we're actually going to draw in. And so I'll make frame left active. I'll click the new layer button. I'm going to double click where it says layer 1. And I'm going to label this frame left drawing. Now, just like what we did last chapter where we limited the area that we were able to draw in by creating a layer mask, we're going to do the same thing to this frame left drawing. I'm going to hold down the Command or Control key, and for my frame left layer, I'll mouse over that content. So I get the little marquee box and I'll click. So I've got a selection for that box. I'm going to make sure frame left drawing is active, and I'm going to click the layer mask button. And I can see that appears to be in the correct position. This is looking good so far. I'm going to make frame middle active. I'll click new layer button. I'm going to type in frame middle drawing. I'm going to command click my frame middle layer underneath it. I'll have frame middle drawing active, and I will click layer mask. And I'll do the same thing for frame right. So frame right's active, new layer, oops, missed the new layer button, new layer, frame right, drawing. I'm going to command click frame right layer contents, and I will click the layer mask button with frame right drawing active. So now I've got a mask system that looks like so. And so when I'm drawing later, so let's say I'm drawing here, we can see it stays. It would probably help if I had color in there. There we go. And sample all layers off. We can see that it automatically masks for me, which makes my life way easier when I'm drawing. Now, when I'm drawing, like drawing a comic with the mixer brush, wouldn't be great. I'm going to let's draw here for now, for the demo. Like I could try to draw this with the mixer brush and I'll get all that kind of blending and stuff. I could switch it to dry or whatever. But there's other tools to do this with. So I've got the regular brush and I've got white active. So let's switch to a color you can see like black. And it just draws. I've got my layer mask active, of course. There we go. And it just draws. And like, that's cool. And like, I can change the size of it, woo, get big, or change the hard edge of it, woo, get hard. But I also have the pencil tool. So if I have both of these active, so if I've got the brush tool active and let's do 35 size and 100% hardness, keep switching to my mask. I wonder why it does that. And I draw a line and I come over to the pencil tool. And it looks like I've got a fancy pencil active. I'm gonna grab hard round and let's set you to 35. And I draw a line, whoop, and it's like they look almost the same. And the difference between these two tools is if I zoom in, we can see this anti-aliasing edging right here, where we've got these kind of transparent pixels along the edge of my line versus this one over here, which has a hard pixel edge. And depending on what you're using these tools for, that hard pixel edge can actually be really useful. But that's the big difference between these two tools. For our drawing, we actually want that anti-aliasing because it looks a little bit better. So we are going to stick with the brush tool rather than the pencil tool. But that's the big difference between these two is anti-aliasing versus aliasing. Okay, so let's go ahead and add in a reference image for us to draw in our comic panels. So for my reference image, I'm going to make my top layer active or none of my layers active, so it'll appear at the top of my layer stack. I'm going to go to File, Placed Embedded. And I've got my sketch.png, and it's a PNG, so we have a transparent background. And I've got a nice, really quick and easy, sloppy sketch on my image. And make sure it pops in centered. Mine popped off a little off-centered, so I'm going to recenter it. And I'll click Done. Now, if I draw right now, it's going to be a little hard to see what I'm doing, so let's make this layer transparent. So with my sketch layer active, I'm going to come up to opacity. I'll type in 35%. And now it's ghosted. So now when I'm drawing lines on my layer, so I'm down here in my drawing layer and I've got black active and I'm painting, I can see where I'm working versus if this was at 100% opacity, it's hard for me to differentiate those two lines. Let's go ahead and pick the brush that we want. So let's expand out our brushes. And instead of that oil brush, we are going to use Classic Cartoonist. So here's Kyle Inkbox's Classic Cartoonist. And I will make frame drawing active. And I want to draw in my lines. And that line's a little thick, so let's go ahead and change the size. So brush tip shape, let's go ahead and drop this down to 15 or so. All right, frame left drawing active, black's my active color, brush tip size 15, Kyle's Classic Inkbox. Let's start drawing. Now when I'm drawing, I don't need to perfectly recreate this sketch. The sketch is sloppy on purpose, but I want nice, clean, straight lines on here. So I could try to turn on smoothing to get straight lines. There's an easier way to get perfectly straight lines. And I lost my mind the first time I saw this on YouTube because my Photoshop teacher didn't tell us this, but so this is great. So like I can draw a straight line two ways. So if I hold down the shift key and I drag to the side, I get a perfectly straight line. If I hold the shift key and draw up, I get a perfectly straight line. We've got diagonals. So if I click, so I'm just left clicking, and then I'm not holding down the mouse and I come up here and then I shift click, it will draw a perfectly straight line between those two spots, making it really easy to get a series of perfectly straight lines on here. And so we just throw some of those on there. And the reason why we're drawing these lines, by the way, is if we look at this comic, we want a feeling of progression through it. So like we have lines pointing like this, we have lines running between the two areas, and then we're going to have lines right here providing a visual end. So it's just a kind of a visual indicator of how somebody should read through this comic. And those little kind of tricks help people understand what they're reading. Grab the erase tool and pull some of that out of there. Now for the rest of the figure, I'm going to zoom in so it's a little bit easier for me to work. And I am going to turn smoothing up pretty far in this case. Let's try 100%. And when I'm drawing this circle, that smoothing, oops, drop down to 0 for some reason. That smoothing will make it much easier to get a nice circle. Again, if you're doing this with a pen tablet, this would be way easier, but a lot of us do not have access to pen tablets. Just grabbing a little bit of erase right there. A lot of us don't have access to pen tablets. All right, B for brush tool. Let's throw on a little eyebrow, another eyebrow, eyeball. You see how it's going kind of slow now, so I'm going to turn smoothing off, and I'm going to then be able to brush in a little bit faster. I gave him a monocle right here, and then I pull it out in the layer panels, which is kind of naughty. So if you want to skip the monocle, you can go ahead and skip the monocle. Now you're going to rinse and repeat for the other 3 layers. Again, you don't have to be perfect. So like you'll just click this next frame and you can start drawing there. Again, horizontal is just shift, click, drag rather than the end and version of it. So I'm going to go ahead and follow through these real quick and I'll switch the video to fast forward mode. Okay, once you finish your drawing, go ahead and hide the brushes panel because we're not going to need it anymore. So I'm just clicking these little arrows. And then we don't need the sketch layer anymore either, so I'm also going to hide the sketch layer so I just have my drawing right here. Next, what we want to do is we want to add in our text. So I'm going to make frame drawing left active. I'm going to expand open my text column, and I'm going to make my T for text tool active. And the text tool has a bunch of settings here that can really change the appearance of it. So I'm just going to throw some lorem ipsum on here so we can see what I'm doing. And oops, we got some leftover settings from other stuff. Let's turn that back off. And I'm going to move this guy to the top of my layer stack so you can really see you can see these kind of different changes as we're going. Okay, so with lorem ipsum, by the way, it's just Latin gibberish that's placeholder text, and it's good for, well, holding place. So for the first option we have the character panel is like literally what font. So like we can change our fonts pretty quickly and easily. There's some cool ones in here. We've talked a little bit about it in the past already. We also have styling right here. So like I'm going to do bold, and that makes my letters thick versus if I do like regular and it thins it back down. I always want to use these rather than my faux ones down here in a minute because these will have had hinting and other stuff like that built into it by the designer of the font. Then we have size, which is pretty self-explanatory. We have something called leading, which is the spacing between the baselines of the text. The baseline is the line that most of the letters rest on, by the way. We have kerning, which is the spacing between individual letter pairs, so I can tighten up or space out my letters a little bit further apart. This is pretty important when you're using larger fonts or display stuff. So like if I was doing graphic design work on this, I would probably, depending on what it would look like, I'd probably tighten up the L and the O, or I might tighten up this L and this I and P, depending on what I wanted and what my font looked like. We also have overall spacing called tracking, so I can change that pretty quickly and easily with my tracking slider. We have horizontal and vertical distortion, allowing me to distort my text. We have baseline shift, so if I wanted to move just one of these letters, so let's say I wanted to move just the M, I can use this to move it up or down in relation to the other letters around it. Color, self-explanatory. And then we have my faux bold. We have my faux italics, and these two are dangerous to use because they will sometimes mess up the font because they haven't been hinted. And hinting is like additional controls for fonts made by the designer of the font that can help fix problems from those. So these are last resort. You should always use it out of here before you use the ones down here. We also have all caps, which makes everything all capital. We have small caps, which changes my lowercase letters to be the capsule letters, but at the lowercase size. We have a non-manual version of this that also makes the letters smaller. So we have subscript and superscript. We have underline, and we have strike through, and then some ligature stuff that we don't really care about. So it's all pretty neat stuff when you're working with fonts. You will need to customize all of that stuff pretty frequently. Let me get rid of this text layer, and let's turn these layers back on. And let's add our text. I'm going to come over to frame drawing left, have that one active. I'll make the T for text tool active, and I want Arial, bold, 12. And then we want leading set to auto. We'll leave this one alone. We'll set tracking to be -10. We'll set our distortion to be 100 and 100. We'll leave base shift alone, and we'll leave all of these off. This ligature thing can stay on. That doesn't really matter. And then in paragraph, I want to make sure I'm set to left alignment, and I'll just click. And hopefully it didn't eat some of my settings. Sometimes it does. And I'm going to type in Herm, did you know, comma. And I'll hit escape to stop typing. I'll make frame middle active, and I'm going to click underneath this guy, and I'm going to do that you can't plant flowers if ellipse. And I want this to be center alignment, so let's select it and make center, please. And then over here, I'm going to do, I want that to be above frame right drawing, so make sure it's here in the layer stack. And we want you haven't bought any. Exclamation mark. And just kind of like with those lines, we're using paragraph alignment to kind of help tell people where the text goes, how they should read it. And it's just another visual indicator for people to help them navigate a comic page. All right, now we want to separate this text away from the background, and we also want to make it a little bit easier to read by adding in a shape around it to, again, help indicate where it goes and what it's with and where to put it. And we're going to do that by bringing in our talk shapes. Now, for whatever reason, Photoshop turned off the default talk shapes, so you'll need to bring yours back. So we're going to go to the Shapes panel, and we're going to click this little drop down, and you want to turn on Legacy Shapes and More, and that will restore this folder of Legacy Shapes. I'm going to make my frame left drawing active. Here in search for my shapes, I'm going to type in talk, and that will bring up this first option right here. And I'm just going to click and drag that into my design. And I've dropped it into the wrong spot, so I'm going to drag it to where I want it to be there. Before we try to size it, let's do some formatting of it over here. I'm going to set the fill to be white. The stroke can stay black, but I want a bigger stroke on it to help make it easier to see. So I'm going to set that stroke to be 20. And the reason why I'm making this bigger than the one for the box, so like our boxes were 10, the stroke is 20, is that it has more visual impact. It will draw people's eye quicker and more easily than the surrounding box for the panel, which is what we want talk bubbles to do. With the move tool active, I'm just going to shrink you down. Whoop. And I'm going to place you about like so. Now, if I want to squish it, I have to hold down the shift key when I'm going over those little areas to squish rather than just change the whole size of it. And that looks pretty good for that one, so I'll click done. Over here is where it says talk 11 in this case. I'm going to do left bubble. And now I want to add in another one. So I could click and drag, or I can just duplicate this one, which I think is easier. So I'm going to hold down Alt Option, and I'm going to drag it down here. I need to move it in my layers panel to be below the related text. And I'm going to label this middle bubble. Let's rotate it. So with the move tool active, I'm just going to give this a spin. And let's stretch it out so it actually fits this. Actually, I'm going to bring it over here a little bit, and then let's squish it. Let's move my text. And a little too close to the edge of the speech bubble. I'm using the arrow keys right now to kind of nudge this around so I'm not fighting snap, because I don't really feel like turning snap off. And that looks pretty good to me. Let's go ahead and add in our next speech bubble. So I'm just going to Alt drag this one up. I'm going to move it in my layers panel to be below the text layer for you haven't bought any. This is now right bubble. And let's give it a spin, and we can immediately see while we're spinning, we're gonna have a problem of getting it to line up. By the way, if you hold shift while it spins, you see how it snaps to a 15 degrees. So I need to flip this guy. So Command T, and then I click this little flip button to flip it to be the direction that I need it to be for my text. And you're a little big, let's shrink you down. Let's squish you. And let's reposition the text in you. And that looks pretty good. Command 0, everything's looking good. Double check your layers panel right now, because this is where it's going to start being really important for your layer panel to be correct. So it should be from the top, sketch. You haven't bought any right bubble, right frame drawing, frame right, that you can't, middle bubble, frame drawing middle, frame middle, herm, left bubble, frame drawing middle, left, frame left, background. And what we're going to do is we're going to group these together so we can apply a layer style to the group. And that by grouping them together, it'll apply it as a single object. And it'll also make our layers easier to see and understand what is going on. So I'm going to make you haven't bought any right bubble drawing and frame right active. And I'm going to hit Command Control G or click the folder at the bottom of the layer panel. And I'll label this frame right. And rinse and repeat. So text layer through vector layer. So I've got 4 layers active. Command G. Frame middle, text layer through vector layer, Command G, frame left. Okay, so let's add in a drop shadow for each one of these to kind of help separate it from its background. So with any of these folders active, doesn't really matter which one. I'm going to click FX and I'm going to go to drop shadow. In drop shadow, multiply black is fine. Then we want to set we'll leave the opacity at 35. We're going to set the distance to be 10. We want to set the angle to be 135. We want to set the spread to be 0 if it isn't there yet, and the size to be 10. So we've got 35, 135, 10, 0, 10. And we'll click OK. And we see it does a nice little separation effect. To add that to the other ones, rather than redoing that, I'm just going to hold down Alt-Option. And I'm going to click and drag on the FX in the layer panel and drag it up and drag it up. And to keep my layer panel nice and organized, I'm going to click the little arrow next to it to collapse it down. And like that's not bad looking. All right, let's go ahead and add in our title text. So with none of my layers active or the sketch layer active, I'm going to hit T for text. And I'm going to click up here and I'm going to type in dad jokes. And it would be good if there's a little bit of a visual separation from this text to the speech bubble text. So let's change its formatting a wee bit. I'm going to come over to my character panel and I'm going to type in 24. And then I am going to make it bold italic. So in my styling, I'll switch to bold italic. And let's get you in a better position and drag you here-ish. Now, when you're working a lot with text and templates, probably what I would do is I'd make like a template of this and save it without any of the drawing or text in there, and just have it so I can pop stuff in and out if I was going to do a lot of 3-panel comics. Or I would also want to come through and I would want to save some text formatting. So like actually looking at dad jokes, why don't we go ahead and grab that? And let's tighten up that text. Let's do -25 for our tracking. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. So like if we don't have that tracking tightened up, we can see that it looks a little too spaced versus if we do -25, which I got to select it all. So if we do 0, we can see that it looks a little too spaced out versus if we do -25, looks pretty good. Now, rather than having to redo that kind of formatting each time I do a title, under character styles, if I click new, I can have it right here where it says character style 1, and I can type in title. And now I can apply that to as many times as text as I need in whenever I'm adding it. So like if I add new text and it deletes the formatting, I click on title and it applies title. Same thing for like you haven't, let's do this one. Did you know? Let's make a new character style, boop, and we'll label this body text. And now I can quickly and easily switch between the two formatting types simply by clicking on the two, without having to come back through and putz around with the settings of the character panel. Neat. Finally, let's add our signature. So I'm going to make a new layer. Ba-doop. Oops, you guys got expanded open when I was putzing. And I'm going to make that new layer up at the top. Boop. I'm going to label you signature. And you will use the brush tool to sign your name. Now, when you're signing your name, like, make it legible, because like if somebody finds this orphaned out on the internet, if your signature is illegible, your signature is mostly useless in terms of being able to advertise what your work, where somebody can find more of your work. So I really stress legible signatures, because that way people can find you. All right, save it as a PSD, and that is good to go.